Hello there, Annie from Mountain Crest Gardens here, and you probably hear me talk a lot about succulent foliage, but it is now spring here, so we're gonna focus in on flowers. And these are just a really fun kind of seasonal addition to cool plants that you probably already know and love and see every day around your house. But those flowers are really helpful in succulent identification, and they make some pretty cool looking bouquets of cut flowers as well. So today I'm going to go over which types of succulents bloom, what to do with them while they're flowering, and some of my favorite varieties that have particularly interesting flowers to them. So let's get started. Sometimes I get the question, can succulents flower? And if so, which ones? And the truth is, all succulents can produce a flower. And they do this so that they can get pollinated and then produce a bunch of seeds. And that's really important, even though, a lot of succulents are very good at propagating from just a leaf or a stem cutting. They're still angiosperms, and they maintain this ability to flower and grow from seed to introduce more diversity into their gene pool. Now, certainly some flowers are bigger, brighter, more prolific than others, like this Haworthia here. And they can also vary a lot in terms of how often they flower and how long those flowers last, and also whether or not those flowers have a fragrance to them. So if you are looking for the most interesting, biggest, boldest, most show-stoppingest succulent flowers that are out there, check the link in the description to our category of flowering succulents. When it comes to caring for a flowering succulent, there's a little bit of back and forth over whether or not you should actually cut off the emerging blooms from your plant. The idea being that, it takes a lot of energy to grow a really big, beautiful flower like this. Energy which could be put towards growing new leaves, deeper roots, things like that. The thing is, a lot of succulents are actually going to stay pretty small and slow growing, even if you do cut off those flowers. And additionally, flowering really is a natural part of a plant's growth cycle. And I'm over here constantly telling people, if you want to grow great succulents, just try to replicate their natural growing conditions. And flowering is part of those natural conditions. That being said, whether you cut them off or not, you're not going to harm your plant. Like, a lot of people will cut off flowers that are just not very exciting, and it's totally fine. So cut them off or not, you do you. But it's not all fun and games when it comes to flowers, folks. You may have heard, some succulents will actually die after flowering, and people will use the term monocarpic or death bloom. And basically, there's a number of plants out there that will only bloom once in their entire lives. And when it comes to succulents, we're generally talking about agave, like the century plant, and sempervivum, also known as hens and chicks. Fortunately, it's pretty easy to tell these death blooms apart from the polycarpic non-death blooms, just because they're going to emerge straight from the center of the rosette, like this one here. And for our agave, it really is going to start looking like just this giant asparagus reaching into the sky. Now, fortunately, for most agave and basically all semps, they're going to produce so many new offsets that are going to live on after the mother rosette has bloomed and died. So you generally don't need to panic too much about a single individual blooming out. Side note though, I've done some fun work to see if I could halt the flowering/dying process in sempervivum, so there'll be a link in the description if you want more details on that. Tillandsias, or air plants, are another one that's only going to bloom once in its whole life, but they tend to live on and produce a lot of offsets for quite a while after flowering. Also, their flowers are just these really large, showy, kind of tropical extravaganzas. So I think if you're going to produce a death bloom, that's the way to do it. When it comes to showy succulent flowers, some of my favorites are found among the cacti. Now, Cactaceae is a pretty big family of plants, and so there's a lot of diversity out there between their flowers. But if I had to generalize, I'd say that they're often pretty big flowers, and sometimes they're on these elevated bloom stalks and they absolutely dwarf the plant below them. And they also are really vibrantly colored. And that's just because The deserts in which a lot of these grow are pretty sparsely populated. So if these guys want to get pollinated, they have to be eye-catching. Some of the more unusual succulent flowers out there come from the Stapeliads. Now, these include things like Stapelia, obviously, as well as Hernia and Orbea, and a lot more. And their flowers are not just eye-catching, they're fly-eye-catching. Because of flies, they're pollinated by flies. And what do flies like but rotten meat? So these little treasures have flowers that resemble carrion, rotten meat, in terms of their color, also their texture. Some of them are pretty furry, and sometimes even their smell. Now, at Mountain Crest, we're really lucky in our greenhouses. Most of the ones that we grow and sell don't have any odor to them at all. Like this one here, yeah, Hernia zebrina, nothing there. This one, however, it's from my personal collection, and yeah, it's a strong, pungent, rotten meat smell. Next up, we have our frost-hardy succulents that are blooming out in our demo garden right now. So this guy here is one of the sedums, and it's an incredible ground cover, but it also produces a ton of flowers. And you can see they're these little star-shaped blossoms, and they tend to come in pink, white, or yellow like this one. And because there's so many of them, they're really helpful to pollinators. And if you plant a mix of these with different blooming times, you can keep your pollinators really well fed on these sedum blooms from spring all the way through into mid-fall. We've got another one of my favorites here, and it is the utterly showy, just delightfully loud Delosperma. And it's extremely prolific as well, but the flowers tend to be a bit bigger than those of the sedum. And they've been bred, so there's a lot of different cultivars of Delosperma available, and they'll have flowers of pink, yellow, orange, white, or even multicolored flowers. And you can kind of see they've got these really shiny, satiny flowers with lots and lots of very narrow petals. So they sort of resemble the flowers of a lithops or a baby toes succulent because they're in the same family. They're all ice plants and mesembs. And as you can see, it's not just me, the pollinators also are big fans of the Delosperma here. For a bunch more fabulous flowers, check out the flowering succulents category at mountaincrestgardens.com. And thank you so much for joining me and all of my flowery friends today. And until next time, happy succulenting.